old maps fade. Paper empires tremble from the deals they made. Clock hands spin like a ticking trap. Golden idols locked in a ledger's lap. Through fluorescent nights and the copiers cry. A restless crew with a reason why. They feel the weight of a silent spark, searching halls for the hidden mark. Every risk is a riddle carved in stone. Every doubt says you stand alone, but there's a fire under polished floors, a call to open ancient doors. Raiders of the consulting arc, charging through the corporate dark. Whips of vision, hats tipped high, chasing truth no fear can buy. Turn the fear into a flame, rewrite rules, rename the game. From the ruins we embark, revolution starts with a spark. Of red tape lines, buried beneath the dotted signs. Old beliefs like booby traps, guarding dusty thinking maps. But courage cracks the marble wall, echoing down the hallway call. Blueprints shifting, daring hands, new horizons shifting sands. Hear the rumble of a rising crew, not just profit, purpose too. When the mission's carved in heart, that's when legends truly start. Raiders of the consulting arc, lighting up the office dark. Banners raised in open air, voices loud and bold repair. Turn the silence into sound, lift the lost and break the ground. From the past we leave our mark, revolution starts with a spark. In the shadows of the tower's crown, where the old kings once looked down.
Wow, episode 3, time flies. And what a soundtrack to please CRM geeks, rock music lovers, and Indiana Jones fans alike. I guess we couldn't keep you waiting for another G65 show episode. To be honest, February kept us busy, March has felt eventful, yet we just cannot stay away. And to keep everyone's nerdy hearts entertained, today we got a special Indiana Jones themed topic. Just for you, Raiders of the Lost Consulting Arc, Revolutionizing CRM Workplace Culture.
Wonderful. In a world captivated by all sorts of copilots, automated insights, and rapid developments or deployments, some have traded core app skills for the latest AI tools. But technology alone doesn't transform organizations. Instead, people do. How can we reclaim the human side of CRM consulting?
Wow, that's a lot to unpack there. But let's not skip our intros first, though, right? My name is Angeliki Patsiavo. I'm a Microsoft Business Applications MVP here in the UK and a Senior Dynamics 365 Manager. I've been a professional and community CRM geek for over a decade with a lot of passion and appreciation for the human impact our business solutions can have. I'm one of your hosts, and sitting next to me on my virtual side is...
Fortunato Di Donato, consultant, blogger, and my last check at the doctor said I'm also a real human. Sitting near Berlin, I'm a D365 solution architect and manager. Being now a developer for now almost 2 decades, started with mainframe programming, the big, huge computers, which are now all located in data centers around the world. And then I switched over to business applications. I have a huge passion for development, for people, and good consulting, but also wonderful podcasts. That's from my side, but I also would like to welcome two really great community friends to mark our third episode. On the one hand, we have Ian Tweedy. I hope I do not butcher your name. Sorry. If yes, then blame to me. You can do everything with my name. Guests usually do this. Power Platform Senior Technical Consultant at Capgemini UK. Also a blogger, dedicated member of the Microsoft community, and a big supporter of various charitable organizations, right?
And on the other hand, we have Dan Barber, another business Microsoft MVP from the UK. Dan is the founder and principal consultant of Strathos. He's also a big member of the Microsoft community and one of the leaders of the UK Dynamics 365 and Power Platform user group. Welcome both. We are delighted to have you. Why don't you tell us a bit more about yourselves first?
Thanks, guys. Ian, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah, so my name's Ian Tweedy. I've been in the Power Platform since I accidentally found myself in it as an IT manager, trying to look after an environment when we first went into the Dynamics Cloud. Before that, I've done consulting, various other platforms, including telephone systems, and I wouldn't recommend anyone touch telephone systems. They can be horrible problems to solve with one-way voice. So yeah, very pleased to be in the cloud world today. But I've done all kinds of roles in the IT arena, including being shouted at by users at first thing on a Monday morning, which is never particularly nice. So it's nice to be here today to talk about the human side of consulting. In terms of Power Platform community, I speak quite a bit. And alongside that, I've written 15 tools that are currently active. It's a touchy subject, that, because it was 16, but then Microsoft stopped one of them from working, which I was very sad about. So it's 15 tools, and get around 500,000 hits across those tools every month. So quite pleased about those. And recently I've been talking with Dan. So yeah, Dan.
Brilliant. Cheers, buddy. So Dan Barber. So as Angeliki said, so I showing my age now. I've done 2 decades of running practices here in the UK for the likes of sort of DXC and Hitachi, and most recently ANS. But I recently set up this bad boy, Strathos. So really enjoying creating something myself. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm supporting partners in our Microsoft ecosystem punch through their growth barriers. As we try and scale, we always hit these. And with my experience, what I try to do is help people get through and mitigate some of those risks and issues and grow successfully. Really happy to be here. Thanks for guys.
That's awesome. Ian, I hear that you also love Jenga a lot. I have a vague recollection of that.
There is well, this is why Dan was still poorly on Monday, because you have to party at the community events, and you've got to play late night Jenga or karaoke, and
occasionally dress up like a rock star. You just never know what's going to happen.
But I remember I won that Jenga match. I'm sure that's what happened.
I'm sure
I
that's how
have
you
videos
remember
showing the opposite. Okay, tell you what, it was a tie. We will need a rematch.
Sounds good to me.
Oh, what a day. Well, let's start with the classics. I'm going to take you back in time. So let's talk about what do you think, based on what you do day to day in your consulting lives, is the current definition of CRM consulting, and how has it truly evolved since the first version of Dynamics 365 CRM? So 1.1 plus. So how do you think this has changed based on what you see and the projects you interact with?
I think it's less about the product and more about the people. I think we're in it's a much harder battle today to keep people focused. You go into a room to consult with clients, and they're busy on their phones, on TikTok, on Instagram. Their minds are drawn elsewhere. We have this real problem with focus now, both inside our own development practices, but also when we're dealing with clients, we're trying to get them to focus on the problem and see what's going on there. And I think that's the real battle. Yes, we've got these wonderful new tools, and they're absolutely fantastic, But how do you get people to focus on what the real business problem is and not look at the shiny new tool and yes, this is fantastic, can do it, but do you really need it? I don't know, Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I've been kicking around since the CRM version 3 days. So I didn't quite go back to version 1 or 1.2, but not many people want to talk about those versions anyway. So version 3, when marketing first came along, and I think one of the biggest things for me is I remember when that came out, I knew everything about that tool. Like literally everything. I could tell you how many characters were in the account name out of the box fields, that kind of thing. Nowadays, when you look at the systems and solutions that we're building, they're not only the dynamic suite has swelled and grown considerably, but now you don't just implement a CRM system. You're implementing Azure, M365, ERP, like all this other line of business applications, all tightly tied in. So it's not. It used to be deployed in isolation, I think would be fair to say, and I think nowadays it's part of a much larger ecosystem. So I think the mindset has shifted quite significantly in terms of what you're getting involved in.
If I may jump in, this is the interesting part. Then sorry, not then, Ian, you said basically that you need the people to focus back on meeting on the original topic. How do you do this, if I may ask? Because sometimes it's quite tricky, right? People tend to play with their toys, which is fine on one side. On the other hand, perhaps not that much, because it shifts away away from the real goal, right?
So for me, it's about trying to get the people I'm engaging with to be excited about the thing that we're looking at, not excited about the thing over here. We need to get them excited about the thing we're looking at and try and draw them into the conversation. I think about different situations here. I think about, fellow developers on a call potentially being distracted, or I think about when you're in a room with a client and the client being distracted, and you have to pull them back into the conversation, pull them back into the problem, or center the problem around then, and turn the question around. And those are things like, well, what do you think, or how does this impact what you do, or could we look at this another way, and really try and get them excited about the problem they're solving. Because if they've got bored, if they've switched off, then you've got no hope of implementing anything good in terms of the solution you're trying to implement, because they'll just like, yeah. 3 months later, it doesn't work, and you haven't done your job properly. And that's not a good experience for anyone. That's a situation none of us want to be in, because we don't want an unhappy client, and definitely don't want a solution that doesn't work.
Yeah, it's definitely that kind of like what's in it for them, sort of taking them on that sort of ADKAR pro side change journey as well, as you're going through those, create the awareness, look at the desire, look at the knowledge, the ability, and then reinforcing that. If they're in the room and they want to be in the room because there's something they're just like, this is going to change my life, this is going to add so much value, then there's no way they're not going to be paying attention. They're not going to be on their phone, because you're actually delivering something that's going to be game changing, something that's truly adding value for that individual or that particular process.
Yeah,
It's very
I also
interesting
think
that you mentioned. Oh, sorry, Ian. I was going to say, mentioning change management anywhere intentionally is so refreshing, so lovely, because it really, as you really believe in, brings a human back into the equation, focuses on them. And many times I've seen that people don't want to spend time in what is kind of like a hard process in the beginning, which is the requirements gathering stage, and doing those kind of design thinking workshops, all of those things that makes them, as you said, Ian, really focus on the problem, get them excited by having some version of an ownership, even though they might not be delivering technically, but they still feel like they're part of the process and they're championing the problem and the users behind it. And unfortunately, because it's an onerous process, people don't necessarily want to spend time in it, and that kind of goes downhill from there. Because if you don't have the right requirements and you're still not invested in the problem, then you're probably just retrofitting products, especially in an AI world where it's so easy to get tempted and put all the latest AI features or agents behind it.
That's exactly the point. The situation that we need to overcome is the following: people are starting to use more and more AI, also during meetings, to get a summary of what happened. But the problem is, the more they are pulling themselves out of the equation, the more we are developing with AI for AI. But in the end, real people are using the software. So what I prefer to use, and again, this depends on the people, on the audience, of course, is to say, guys, we are developing for you, not for other machines. So it's your requirements. We have with Microsoft's products, we have really terrifying good software to adapt to your needs. But then the you is needed in the meeting, right?
Yeah,
And
you
I think
use a
that's the
really
problem.
critical word there, Forty. You use the word need, and this is something that Ian and I wax lyrical about on some of our sessions, is that difference between want and need. Understanding a lot of the time we talk to customers, and they're very good at telling us what they want. Sometimes they're so technically involved, they've even got designs, they've started solutionizing things. But our job as consultants is to be that friendly professional challenger, to consult, to actually get in the room and say, I understand what your want is. I think listening to your actual root problem, this might be what you need, and this is why I think that. That's our kind of role, and that's the human element of it. To get that context of what's going on and applying all that brilliant knowledge and expertise and experience and applying it to the business in front of you.
And I think you've got these two sides of the coin. You've got this kind of delivery. You've ordered something from your favorite online shopping provider, and I'm just going to push it through your letterbox, and I don't really care if it solves your problem or not. Or I'm going to come in to your house and I'm going to design you a new kitchen, and it's going to be the cups are going to be where you need them to be, the kettle's going to need to be where it needs to be. Everything's going to be within the right reaching distance. And in fact, the thing that comes to mind when I say that is McDonald's, where everything is, everything's in the right place. If you watch how their kitchens work, everything is in the right place. And that's what we want to design for a customer, where everything's in the right place. You don't want to just push something through the letterbox and say, good luck. It doesn't feel like consulting. That's, just delivering something.
Amen to that. Can I be controversial for a moment?
Oh, please.
We are still delivering intricate CRM systems. Do you think we are still rewarding and even being able to provide the critical CRM skills that are needed in the market? Do people still have the core app skills?
Do people have the core app skills, or do people need the core app skills?
I dare say that they do need them, because at the end of the day, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've seen, and obviously we're very invested in all sorts of AI features and AI agents, you name it. But if you don't have a core implementation that is working, then, and in the data point, how that goes, then it doesn't really work. So do we still have enough people that have the critical CRM skills to be able to deliver these implementations, or to, do some recovery projects before you're able to even add the AI layer? And what I'm talking about is, the core CRM skills, for example, in the sales, because that's kind of one of my main babies. Do we know people that truly understand sales, truly understand the lead life cycle, truly understand how to implement customer insights integration? I'm talking about those kind of critical skills before AI even comes into play. Do we still have people that are investing in those skills beyond the certification and able to deliver a technical project around them?
I think so, and I think potentially I'll kind of unpick that element a little bit more, where you talk about those core critical skills. So you've got the core technical skills, the pillars of dynamics, the field service, the customer service, sales, marketing, those elements, but then you've got those, the human centric skills that come with it, but if you think about my point I made earlier about when CRM 3 was around, you knew everything. CRM was CRM, it was one box. Now there's a proliferation of so many add-ons, Power Pages, Power Platform integrated with it. There's so much to know. And I think yes, we do definitely need and have people with core skills. But I think there is an overt pressure, both from organizations and individuals themselves, to try and either create or become unicorns themselves. You no longer can be that unicorn that knows the entire box anymore, or there are very, very few of them, and if they exist, they're very expensive. But what it is it's a transition to the fact that everyone develops their own superpowers, their own critical capabilities in particular areas. And now what I see as a critical skill is your ability to network and create a network of individuals that you collectively can deliver the whole, and you don't think of yourself as an individual anymore. So kind of roundabout way of answering your question, but hope that worked.
And I think that's got harder since we've been working at home more. I think we've become more disconnected from each other, and we've got, because of, you've got the force of the fact that we're more disconnected from our clients and more disconnected from each other. And we've got the kind of the attraction of, there's probably a couple of million engineers sat in my phone right now trying to get my attention all the time, every day. And that's you've got a real problem there. And I think that causes an issue when you come to do an implementation project where people can't focus on what they need to focus on.
If I may also jump in, I think that we have two main problems here. On the one side, we have people that are going more and more mentally in an autopilot situation, where they are basically saying, look, everything, this gap that I may have will be solved by AI, no matter what, it will be solved. On the other hand, we have, how do I say it, the problem that AI perhaps does not understand all the requirements, does not put all dots together that perhaps we humans see, because we have the possibility to see those things, to anticipate them, because of experience, because of what we know around that the client perhaps is not even aware of. And this is a huge topic, because this is, I think, what consulting really means. It's not about realization. It's also important, and it's good that someone does it finally. But to understand the real need is really the problem. And AI at the moment cannot solve this. There's this wonderful YouTuber who held this glass cup upside down and says, look, this is this wonderful gag gift that someone took me. I think there is a problem because the glass is closed on upwards and open on backwards. What shall I do? A normal consultant would say, yeah, turn it around and then you have your glass back. It's not you're holding it wrong. But AI basically says, look, this is a wonderful joke that someone brought to you. Grok had a problem with it. Gemini had a problem with it. ChatGPT had a problem. Realizing the topic, the situation, and switching things and see an opportunity instead of problems, I think where consulting really is needed. But this is where we are needed, because we are developing for humans, and humans are not always aware about what they really need.
Yeah, and let's face it, we work with technology organizations that really don't like to give people only one way of doing things. They like to give them 300 ways of doing things, and some are better than others. Some are really not a good idea, and some are a great idea, and for us to differentiate at the right point in time with the right context to understand actually of scenarios A, B, C, D, E, you really want to be looking at a solution C for this. This is the right fit, the right solution for you.
This is exactly what. Sorry, this is exactly what Adrian is saying in the chat. Basically, AI cannot read between the lines. We are closing the gap. It's like Jurassic Park, where we are filling the gaps of DNA with other things, right? In the hope that it will be good.
And I think often you need to look at it from the point of view of, there is no best option of solving a lot of the problems. I tend to deal with a lot of, integration type issues where we're having to extend outside of the ecosystem. And nearly always I look at it from the point of view of what's the least worst option, because there isn't a perfect option here. And I don't want to sell it as a perfect option. This is the least worst option, either based on cost or throughput, or something along those lines. And this is why you can't fully hand over, because you need to assess all the options. Hang on a minute, how's this situation going to look when you've got, a few thousand people hitting your website versus just 10? That's just what you usually have on a daily basis. So you have to look at those different options, and you can't just hand the keys over and hope for the best. And then you look at data models as well, and you think, well, that data model that you've come up with there, works in this situation, but when we apply it to this other situation, we've got a higher throughput, it doesn't work at all, or we're going to end up with a lot of unused fields and a lot of storage that we're using up. So these things have to be thought about. And going back to what Angeliki was saying about those core skills, I think they absolutely have to be there. You can have your apprentice AI worker working for you, but I feel like you still need to be the boss. You still have to say, hang on a minute, that data model is not going to work, or hang on a minute, the way you're integrating that is a bit flaky. It will work today, but won't necessarily work all the time or in an emergency situation.
I think what
You
a
know, you really
consultant,
remind me. I don't know if you all have seen that a meme where a human is asking, an AI solution, can I eat this mushroom? The AI says yes, then the person dies, and then the bot is hanging over its grave. He's like, oh, it looks like you were right. Do you want to know more about poisonous mushrooms? It's a little bit too late. And essentially, as you said, you have not been the boss of it. You didn't have probably all the right knowledge. But I also do respect what you mentioned, that we've come to a place where it's impossible to know everything about a single product. But we do have to appreciate the importance of having multiple people with different kind of specialties that can come together in a team. And this very much leans into the human-centered argument around believing that a team is greater than the individual and that they can really support each other. And yes, I hear you, Ian. It's hard when we feel a bit more alienated post-pandemic and spending less time in the office. But may I say, I think there's an opportunity also. So the beautiful example is pair programming. I've somehow, maybe it's just my luck, I've mainly worked in teams that were primarily overseas. And what I mean by overseas might have been India, it might have been Philippines, sometimes America, not many people from the UK or even Europe sometimes. And so even pre-COVID, I would probably not be able to work with them. And I really, really enjoy getting on a call and troubleshooting together or putting a solution together, something. Like it's so powerful to build a better relationship, to learn from each other, to understand each other, because we are humans at the end of the day. And so seeing each other's perspective is easier in this more personal approach. Do you think people are taking advantage of all the lovely tech that we have around us, whether it's Teams, whether it's any other kind of, opportunities like getting on on a board together and do a workshop together, even if it's virtual, like mural kind. Do you think people are taking advantage of the tech that is out there to be closer to each other and work together?
I wish they would do more of it, but I think they do under certain circumstances. But we're all looking at our computers now. You'll get a ping from WhatsApp on the side of your screen. You'll get a ping from Teams on the side of your screen. Every time that happens, you're getting distracted, and your mind is going away from that connected human experience, and that moving away detracts from our service. I make a real conscious effort to try and switch everything off when I'm on a call, particularly when it's an important call. I mean, we all end up at town halls and maybe we don't necessarily focus as much as we should on a town hall call. I'm not admitting to anything there, but when we're in like a small group of people, it's really important. But then how often have you been on a call and someone goes, oh, can you just repeat that for me? And you're like, you've been caught out there. You were typing an email. I mean, I did it this morning, and that I think is the problem. And that's something we've all got to be really aware of, that if we are communicating digitally, we have to make sure that we consciously focus and we consciously pay attention to the other person, because we want it to be a human interaction. I totally agree. Flying around the world is not always possible, certainly with family commitments and other things like that. And it's no good for the planet either. And if you can get a one-on-one with someone and you're troubleshooting code or you're doing pair programming, it's absolutely fantastic, and it's far better than being in the office. But you would never sit in the pub opposite a friend. If we go back to when we were in Scotland playing Jenga, we weren't looking at our latest WhatsApp messages come in, were we? We were just playing Jenga and having fun. And that's that difference, isn't it? You haven't got that distraction.
Yeah, but what's interesting to piggyback that is that how much time do we and do the audience have dedicated from our organizations to facilitating remote discussions. We used to do a lot of stuff face to face, but how much time do we actually, as a learning piece, as a human element of our development, how much do we develop our capability to facilitate discussions remotely? How do we keep audiences engaged? Stop them looking at their phones, their WhatsApp messages, and things like that. There's lots of tricks and things you can do to try and keep those remote audiences engaged. So I think, with being remote, I think the development of our human skills is far more important now. Building those relationships virtually is much harder than when I used to walk into a workshop, physically shake someone's hand, and go and have a cup of coffee with them at the break. We don't have that anymore. So how can we build those relationships so that we can build that rapport and have a great relationship moving forward?
There is the right tool for the right audience, I always tend to say. So for example, for us gamers that worked with, I played EverQuest, 80, 120 people in one room, not even in TeamSpeak, because nobody could afford to have that much bandwidth. We basically used chat. And there was twice a year, there was a big meeting where we all met. I don't know where, but it was always somewhere else, and it worked. I think that there are still bonds from that time, 2 decades ago almost. Quite old, I'm getting. But it depends. It depends on the people. I think that in the last years, technology provided us many possibilities to get connected with each other. But I also see it sometimes as an excuse to not stay connected with each other. What I mean by this is we are narrowing down the way how we talk to each other and when we basically substitute the office meetings, which are there to have 5 minutes here, discuss with 2 people, 3 people, discuss during lunch about other topics and such. We are substituting this by having closely timed appointments, one after the other in our calendars. We are having less possibility to go beyond the scope of the meeting. We are scoping everything into short, narrow pieces of chocolate that we use. We unwrap them, we eat them, we move on. And this brings some possibilities, but also cuts us off, right? That's it.
And I 100% think this drives us towards a transactional way of thinking, almost like a very mercenary way of thinking, where you're like, well, I'm here, I'm taking an order off my customer, I'm going to, put it into a package, I'm going to stick it through the letterbox, and I'm going to get on to the next one. And you end up being very, very metric driven, driven by your profitability number or your RV number, and it's kind of output over outcomes, and it's yes, I did that, and it's off my desk, and that's what I care about, and I don't care that it's set fire to something else, and that's I think a trend we're starting to I can certainly feel that trend, and I think there's plenty of things that can force us away from that trend or to kind of move us away from that trend, but I see it as a balance, and we talk about this, and we always get red faces when we talk about this. Dan knows exactly what word's coming. It's the missionary versus mercenary argument. And, are you a missionary consultant? Are you going in there to act like a missionary and do good for the business? Or are you just, there's a thing, there's a thing. You ask for a thing, there's a thing. Are you trying to solve the business problem or not? And there's lots of forces that work on us to drive us that balance.
That's the point. Someone said, I do not want to do a business analysis. Or requirements analysis. I want to be a consultant. Whereas I say, well, you cannot move. One thing is connected to another. So if you want to really solve things, you need to understand your client, your customer. And this means to do more.
Yeah. So if you go back to, I think the original question was, but where was consulting come from? When I started my career, we used to do, before I went to see a client, I did a deep background on that client. I got to know the industry and I got to know the business. And then when I started engaging with that client, we used to do things like shadowing. We used to physically go to their site, work with some of the frontline workers to understand what their pains, what they're doing. Very much now it's a very remote feel, and it's requirements sometimes given from the C-suite down. So you're developing a system for management or what is being told the management is wanting. Yet the actual frontline workers may have different needs and different problems and different pains. So going back to those grassroots to saying, right, actually, I need to be able to understand that business, understand the industry, understand why they're doing what they're doing, and where I can add value. We think about AI now, and is AI going to take this job or that job? At the end of the day, there's a human behind that AI. If you want to prompt something, you have to ask it a good question. And to ask it a good question, you need to do deep critical thinking, deep problem solving to understand exactly what you're trying to solve. Otherwise, what is it? Crap in, crap out is the phrase, I think.
Yeah, that's what they say. And to stay true to our theme of the day, it sounds like we're talking a lot about workplace culture and putting the human very much in the front and center and behind the wheel again. How do we foster, how do we, dare I say, revolutionize workplace culture in a way where we are driving more trust and empathy, both within our teams, with our clients, with each other generally, so we can build those foundations?
So humans, we're reflective animals. We reflect what we see. That's huge. So if we are treated like numbers, don't be surprised if we treat our clients like numbers. And that's the way that's just the way humans are. And you want to see this work really simply. I think about my two children. If my daughter snaps at my little boy, what do you think he does back to her? He snaps back. Humans are reflective. If you snap at your partner, if I've had a tiring day and I snap at my partner, chances are she'll snap back at me, or she'll snap back at me eventually, and that will happen. So it's not just about the practice we work in or the organization we work in treating us well and looking after us like we're a human rather than a number. A little bit of that responsibility also falls on the clients. And we had a really interesting talk about this when we were down in Bristol. And one of the members of the audience turned around and said, "No, I'm going into that business and I'm going into there to do good. I'm on a mission. I'm there to breed good to that business." And we pushed them and we said, at what point would you move from missionary to mercenary? At what point would you flip that switch? And they admitted they would. If they were adamant that they wanted this, they wanted the walls pink. The walls were going to get painted pink. I don't care. No, they're getting painted pink. Eventually, they will flip the switch and go, "No, fine. I'll write it up. I'll put it in the raid log. I'll record it down, and you can have your pink walls." And I'll say, "I recommend it's wrong, but I'll give you pink walls, and I'll do it just to prove you wrong." And I think that's an interesting thing, because it's not only the organization we work for; it's also the clients we have that have a kind of that are a force on this decision.
And I think I'd probably look at it through a slightly different lens. When Angelique is talking about sort of the empathy and trust and how do we develop those kind of skills, it's you mentioned that word transactional. It's a very impersonal thing, and if we move towards that impersonal thing, then you are just going to have a very transactional relationship. For me, when I work with consultants, when I work with partners, I really try to hammer home the fact that developing rapport, developing empathy, increasing your EQ, developing skills like active listening and things like that, where when you're actually starting off and you're building relationships with your project team, both internal and external, the more development and the more time you can invest in getting to know those people, not only are you going to get a better result because you understand what they're trying to do, but the interactions, the quality of the interactions, and let's face it, the flexibility when inevitably some things don't go to plan on both sides is there. So the relationship becomes much stronger. So I think putting an emphasis on developing the rapport level with your clients and with your internal project team, it just compounds and makes sure that you've really got a great relationship to build on.
I think that
This is a very interesting point that you made there, Dan, because it relates to spending time with each other, making the effort to see each other's point, each other's day to day. And just to take a question/prompt from our audience, Natalia said, "How do your clients respond when you ask to see them, to shadow them, to ask them as many questions as needed?" And I'm sure we've all had very different reactions to it. You have people that basically don't want they don't have the time for you, they don't really want to be shadowed, they feel watched, or they just are not even interested in the transformation program. But when you do find people that are interested, it's because they feel seen, they want to be heard. This is a real opportunity for them to have a voice because they are the real users. They're ones that see the friction beyond the high level management view. And seeing someone that has that eagerness to talk, to be seen, to have a voice, I think it's wonderful. Not only does it provide us an opportunity to build that empathy and trust, but to create some wonderful solutions that may not just look at the latest features of the latest product, but maybe it's going to be about a very simple solution that is solving a really, really big problem. You know, the infamous quick win, but it might make a really big difference to someone's life. And
But
it's not just about making it shiny and fancy.
but
Yeah.
it can
So
also cause
it can work
problems.
out.
What I mean by this is, if someone is, this is what I have experienced in the past. I once had a situation where I was in a room with different people and I wanted to understand what they are doing, how they are working, to get an idea on how we would transform this process into digital something. And there were two people that basically were very, well, how do I say it politely, not working with me. And at some point I had the opportunity also, again, in a one-on-one during lunch, basically, where we talked about this topic. And then I understood why they were against everything. So they had their own agenda. They basically said, yeah, but this will substitute what I'm doing. I'm not needed anymore. And this was the situation where I said, yeah, look, but no, it's not that way. But this was not even AI. Now with AI, we have more and more the situation. So this is the question is, if someone does not want to talk, it would be interesting to understand why, right? So this is what I do.
Absolutely,
Put
and
them
that
into the
goes
equation.
back to what we were talking about. You know, building that rapport, getting that level of communication to a point where the trust has increased to a level where they can open up a little bit to you to understand, you know, what the perceived threat, you know, or what the perceived issues or problems are, because that's when that gives you, you know, Angeliki, go back to change management again, but that gives you an opportunity once you develop that trust and you can actually have a sensible, deeper level of conversation with them, then you can create that awareness and develop that desire with that individual to understand, actually, you see this as a threat. Did you realize this is actually an opportunity? Because we're going to do this, which is going to allow you to do that. And suddenly you've turned them around from a detractor to an attractor, you know. But you can only do that once you develop that level of trust through the engagement, through the communication you've got.
I think the reason why so many of us were successful at the start of COVID is because we built all those relationships and we were working off those relationships, those trust elements. And the reason why we're starting to see problems now is it's harder to get those relationships. It's still important to go to client site. It's still important to get eyes on with a customer, at least for 1 or 2 sessions before then moving that to remote. If you try and do it throughout the whole engagement, I think you just really struggle to break those trust barriers down and kind of to get that connection with one another, which I think is also why community events are much bigger now, is because we're herd animals. We long for that connection with other humans, and therefore we'll put more effort into going to a community event now than we would have potentially before COVID, when we had that connection more in the office.
But interesting, you mentioned communities there. What's interesting is how much more content do you see available now that talk about the human side of consulting than we did 5 years ago? 5 years ago, it was just tech. You know, feel free to challenge, but now I'm seeing dedicated tracks in conferences dedicated to how we interact as human beings, and I think it always has been important, but it's been lifted up a level, and I think AI is going to lift it up a level even more.
Great. The problem is that our time is running away, it flies by. I would use the opportunity perhaps to get some questions. Are there anyone? At least one? Looking at the time, I'm getting one.
Oh, I think we got a prompt here.
Ooh, on that note, what skills should consultants continue to focus on developing, and which skills should we be prepared to hands off to AI? Wonderful question. Great. Who wants to start to talk for the next 2 hours?
No pressure.
So warming up, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I think some of the skills you can hand off to AI, to not whole and soul necessarily, but you can look at things like coding, writing test scripts, developing requirements, user stories and acceptance criteria. Some of these where there's I've certainly seen it on projects a lot, where you get customers and consultants staring at a blank screen going, how do I articulate this requirement into a user story format and acceptance criteria? And they'll stare at a blank screen for 20 minutes before they can get stuck in. So some of those things are going to allow us to unblock those, and certainly AI not take over, but certainly help an awful lot. But the ones that consultants could focus on is making sure that we're developing the right solution. We talked about it an awful lot here. It's critical thinking, it's problem framing, it's these kind of skills where you actually you develop your listening capability, which sounds really simple. It's a basic human characteristic, but trusting that and leaning into that, and making sure that when you're talking to a customer, you're talking about what are their problems, what are their values, what are their business processes. You hear Microsoft talk about this a lot with AI. It's like, well, you can't have an AI strategy and you can't develop AI tools if you don't know what your processes are. So you've got to work with customers to understand how they work, how they operate. They're never going to scale, never going to be able to really embrace AI unless you can get it out of their heads. And the only way you can get it out of their heads is being a great consultant, facilitating great workshops and using those human skills. I'll get off my soapbox now.
If I may add to that, Dan, I think it's important to also add that critical thinking and comprehension to the AI tools we are using or suggesting as well. So before using it, to truly understand how it operates, because A, how can we use it successfully and efficiently otherwise, but B, how do we know how to choose the right tool for the right process? Because there's many ways to get to Rome, but that doesn't mean that it will necessarily be right for us or the project or client and so forth. So truly ask people to invest in their understanding a little bit more rather than jumping into the understandable excitement behind it. What about you, Ian?
For me, it's definitely the kind of the low hanging fruit that would slow me down. I don't enjoy writing emails particularly, so having it help me with all that low hanging fruit and documentation as well. So documentation and diagramming is something I do. I enjoy it, but moving everything around in Mermaid or Plant UML and organizing it properly, I'd rather ask AI to do it for me and then go, actually, yeah, you got that in the wrong place. So it comes back to that assistant type thing. I still think that critical thinking, those decisions, what's the least worst way we could do this, or what are the different options we've got here, they still sit with us. Certainly when I build a threat model, I get AI to help me build it, but I'm still looking at going, yeah, that's not relevant here. I'm not quite sure why you came up with that. But almost, what's the best way? Maybe the grunt work. And I don't know how you necessarily don't develop those skills, because I still think, and this is one of the worries I've got actually, is we've got a little bit of a triangle at the moment where people will leave education or they'll come into the industry and they'll do some of that grunt work, and that builds up their skills and builds up that knowledge, and they'll move up and they'll move up and they'll move up, or they'll leave. And then with AI doing some of that grunt work, I think we're going to lose some of that opportunity for the next generation to develop. And that makes me feel a bit sad actually, that there's not as many opportunities for them to develop, because we'll get AI to write that boilerplate code for us instead of getting them to do it, or get AI to write that test script for us instead of getting someone who's early in careers to do it. And that's fine today, but what does that mean in 10 years time? When
are we looking through that as I gotta challenge that a little bit. Are we looking at that with a little bit of a bias lens there, from the fact that we've grown up learning the grunt work, learning how to code, learning how to do those bits?
They should suffer like us.
No, but you go back to a basic example. Just because calculators were invented doesn't mean we forgot how to do maths,
True.
and
Very true.
and build that into our everyday lives. It just made us more efficient, and we used that efficiency. We used that time to focus on more value add things. AI is a tool. It's a fantastic tool. It's going to take us great places. But it maybe just changes our lens. Maybe future generations are going to look at that and go, why would we ever learn how to do object oriented programming? That just gets done by that, and then we build our value. Our value is here. I'm learning these value skills because they aren't value skills anymore.
So there is
Sounds
a
like we're
future.
brewing a Back to the Future episode at some point.
Exactly. Exactly. So it will be a wonderful land of opportunities, and who knows what it will bring, right? But perhaps it will bring fortune and glory. Well, all right. Chatting with you all today. Looking at the time, I need unfortunately to stop. Everything comes to an end, basically. Thanks to Ian and Dan for joining us today as our guests, and Angeliki for being my co-host. And of course, a big thank you also goes to our listeners out there. You are great and make our geeky heart smile. Yes, it's smiling. We hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed discussing. Unfortunately, all things come to an end.
Oh,
It's
come
been
on,
great
do
chatting.
they? We would like to invite everyone online to join in and keep sharing in the comments. We really appreciate everything you've shared so far, but keep at it. We'd love to engage with you further. What did you think about this topic? What is the biggest impact CRM Consulting has delivered for you and your projects, or maybe has missed so far? We'll be signing off from the show for today and saying goodbye to our guests. Keep an eye out for the next episode through the M365 Show Family Network account on LinkedIn. Enjoy your CRM adventures and keep rocking, everyone. Thank you.
Keep
Thanks,
rocking.
everyone. Keep in
Cheers.
touch.
Bye.
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 Your next customers don't need more ads. They need trusted signals. The M365 show is where the Microsoft ecosystem shows up. Practical, community-driven sessions with real makers, admins, architects, and decision makers. When you sponsor, you don't interrupt people. You show up inside the conversation, where trust and context already exist. Sponsorship means brand visibility, a clear call to action, and content that keeps working through distribution and AI discoverability. Option 1. $99 a sponsor video up to 2 minutes placed in an existing episode. Option 2. $699 one moderated show with 1 or 2 guests plus premium PR and AI indexing. And the power play, $2,000 the ultimate global distribution package. You're a sponsor in every show for 2 years, including one moderated show with 1 or 2 guests, plus premium PR and AI indexing. Because when Microsoft teams evaluate tools, they don't search for ads. They remember the brands that taught them something and showed up consistently. If you want visibility with real Microsoft practitioners and content that keeps working, sponsor the M365 show. Visit m365.show and let's build your next pipeline moment.